If your engine roars like an Earnhardt, you're living life in the fast lane. From Ralph Earnhardt, who laid the foundation with grit and determination in the 1950s, to Dale Earnhardt Sr., the iconic intimidator with 7 NASCAR championships. His fearless driving and unforgettable victories made him a legend. And then, there's Dale Jr., with his 2 Daytona 500 wins and a record 15 Most Popular Driver awards. He's kept the Earnhardt name in the winner's circle.
Hello everybody. I want to start this program with a couple of questions. The first one, what is a dynasty? I want you to think about that for a minute. What makes something a dynasty? The dictionary says a dynasty is defined as, quote, a succession of people from the same family who play a prominent role in business, politics, or some other field. Okay. That'll work. Second question, does the United States of America have any dynasties? Truth is, we do. And we find them in different things: politics, big business, sports. Big business, we think of the Vanderbilts, the DuPonts and others. They built their fortunes with business. The Roosevelts, the Kennedys, and the Bushes are known for building fortunes, yes, but also for having multi-generational politicians in their mix. And then the Walton family is also a very familiar name. Among the wealthiest families listed by Forbes in 2024, the Walton family was listed as America's richest. That dynasty at that point was worth $432 billion and change. Old Sam Walton knew what he was doing when he put together Walmart and then Sam's. They've done just fine. Sports, though, also has its own set of dynastic families. In football, I think the first name that would come to mind would be the Manning family. They're considered dynastic, and it starts with grandfather Archie, who now has a grandson who's going to play collegiate ball, we think, one more year, and then off to the NFL he will go. We also have dynasties in tennis. The one I think of most often is the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, because what they've done in tennis has been truly remarkable. I know they're sisters, but that's family, and that counts. And there are others that can be found in every sport. Today, though, I'd like to focus on the Earnhardt Dynasty. It's a multi-generational family that has made race car history for decades, even before NASCAR was formed. The 2 dominant figures in the Earnhardt Dynasty story are Dale Earnhardt Jr. and his father, Dale Earnhardt Sr. However, there are other figures in the family who shouldn't be overlooked because it's a remarkable family. And everyone, to one degree or another, has contributed to its dynastic success. First, we need to take a look at the 2 who started it all. Dynasties have to have a beginning, and the Earnhardt dynasty had one. Ralph Earnhardt is considered the patriarch of the Earnhardt family. He was born in 1928. He passed away very early, really, in 1973. He was into cars and racing from a very early age. When he was growing up, building and rebuilding motors was a highly prized skill. He was born right before the 1929 market crash, so money was tight, and having skills was critical. Many of us today don't realize how important knowing exactly how a car worked and knowing exactly how to repair it and even modify it, how important those skills were in those early days. Ralph was an excellent they say rather natural mechanic. He knew how to make things work. He was a good early racer on both dirt surfaces and later paved surfaces. Both of those surfaces require different driving skills, and Ralph was good at both of them. Tony Eury, quoted in the book Angel in Black, says this: "My father raced, and Ralph Earnhardt built his motors. Ralph was kind of a quiet and kind of different from most of the drivers. He wasn't a conversationalist. He didn't have a whole lot to say. If he didn't want you around, he just wouldn't talk to you, so you would leave. He had to pay for all of his own equipment, and he would take care of his equipment. He didn't get out there and really charge. He would run second all night to keep from beating his car up, and then beat him in the last lap, or whatever he had to do to win the race he was in." That equipment that Mr. Eury mentions included both the tools that Ralph needed to work on cars, plus the old car he was trying to race. As the old saying goes, behind every good man, there's a good woman, and Ralph had a good woman. He met his future wife at the Cannon Mills textile mill in their hometown of Cannonopolis, North Carolina. She was very active in the Baptist church there, and she became what we call now the matriarch of the Earnhardt family. Her name is Martha Coleman Earnhardt. She was born in 1930, and she died in 2021. She married to Ralph. She was married to him from 1947 until he died in 1973. Together they had 5 children, 2 girls, Kay and Kathy, and 3 boys. Kay was born in 1948 and Kathy in 1950. Dale was the firstborn son, born in 1951. His brothers Randy and Danny were born in 1952 and 1955. Randy died of cancer in 2013. Kay died in 2015. Danny passed away in 2021, 2 weeks before his mother's death. Martha admits that she ran in one race, a ladies' race, at Hickory Speedway in North Carolina. She wrecked. On NASCAR.com, there's this comment about her. Martha Earnhardt said she tried her hand at racing just once in a powder puff derby, a race for women at the Hickory Speedway. She crashed, lamenting the lack of practice before the event. "That was my one and only," she said. "It didn't work. I just wasn't meant to be a race car driver." Miss Martha, Mama to her family, might not have been able to drive a race car, but she could do much more important things. She was a good wife to Ralph. She was a good mother, a good grandmother to her children. She was even a second mother to many of the other race car drivers, even those who competed against her own family. She became a symbol of the positive things about racing and race car drivers. When she died in 2021, many in NASCAR Nation mourned the loss. There are dozens of books about the Earnhardts, about race car racing, about NASCAR. Some of the books about the Earnhardts were even written by Earnhardts themselves. For this program, for my research, I selected actually 3 books, 2 books for adults, and surprisingly, a children's book to help me tell the Earnhardt story. The first book is Angel in Black, Remembering Dale Earnhardt Sr. This is Ralph's son, the second generation. Tom Gillespie wrote it, published by Cumberland House. It was published in 2008. This book is a book that would be especially fun for someone who just wants to read a series of stories, incidents about Dale Sr. It's really just a collection of memories from people who knew him, People who raced with him, people who raced against him, just casual friends. It's not a flowing chronological book. It's really just a series of memories. But it gives a good glimpse into the man who actually put NASCAR on the map with his incredible driving skills. Here's a review of his book that I think will help you understand what I'm saying. It's Tom Gillespie on Goodreads. In Angel in Black, remembering Dale Earnhardt Sr., the Intimidator, that was his nickname, on and off the racecourse. The Intimidator is remembered through hundreds of anecdotes, stories, and insights recounted by fellow drivers, team members, NASCAR officials, and friends and associates. Together they offer a unique and touching reminiscence of one of the greatest and most charismatic race car drivers ever to climb behind the wheel. The second book that I selected is this one, Racing to the Finish, My Story, and it's written by Dale's son, Ralph's grandson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., published by W Publishing, came out in 2018. It's an amazing read for sports fans in general, and NASCAR fans in particular. It details race after race from the driver's perspective, but the book is much more than that. It's also going to fascinate anyone who has ever suffered a concussion or known someone who has had one. It's personal for our family because our daughter suffered a concussion. The book is centered on Dale Earnhardt's racing career as the third generation of the Earnhardt Dynasty, but its heart is centered somewhere else. It's on the personal side of coming to grips with the long-term effects of multiple concussions. Dale Jr. was living what the NFL was also researching, the brain injuries that changed lives forever. Here's a review of this book. In this gripping narrative from one of professional sports' most beloved figures, Dale Jr. shares stories from his journey, how his career and his injuries have transformed him, how he made the decision to retire at the end of the 2017 season after 18 years behind the wheel, and what lies ahead for him in the next chapter of his life. There's no second guessing and no regrets from driver of number 88. He simply wants to go out on his own terms and make the rest of his life off the racetrack count. This is not a light book about race cars and the people who drive them. Instead, it is a day-to-day account of Dale Jr.'s multiple concussions and his multi-year efforts to overcome those concussions. Including in the book are riveting accounts of actual races, as I said before, and the crashes. And it's from the race driver's perspective, and so that makes it far more interesting than just somebody saying, well, and then it crashed. What makes it different is that after the race, he also shares the after effects of those crashes. Race car fans had rarely heard about concussion injury until this book. It's well worth the read, as readers literally watch this third-generation driver transition from a no-holds-barred race car champion to a man who must face the reality of never racing again. The third book that I picked for my research may surprise you. It's a children's book. It surprised me, frankly. It's called Buster's Trip to Victory Lane. It was written by Dale Earnhardt Jr., third generation Earnhardt. Published by Tommy Nelson, and it was came out in October of 2022. I'm not going to tell you about this one quite yet. I'm going to save it for a little later in the program. Now let's turn our attention to the patriarch. Let's take a closer look at the man who began the dynasty, Ralph Earnhardt. To really understand the Earnhardts and what they accomplished through these successive generations, we've got to understand the world of race cars. And to understand the world of race cars, we have to go back to the earliest days of fast cars outrunning everyone else, even the law. We must go back to the days of prohibition and the rise of a highly skilled car driver who became known as a runner. In a great little article called NASCAR Rooted in Prohibition Bootlegging at themobmuseum.org, it says this: from North Carolina to Spokane, Washington, bootleggers during Prohibition used souped-up automobiles to stay ahead of federal agents and local police while transporting illegal whiskey on back roads in the dark of the night. The idea was fairly simple. Take a car that looks ordinary on the outside, modify the engine for greater speed, remove the floorboards, passenger, and back seats to store as many cases of liquor in there as possible, install extra suspension springs to handle the extra weight, a dirt-protecting plate in front of the radiator, and run the prohibited booze to customers by outsmarting or outrunning the authorities. 1 year later, in 1933, Prohibition ended. The runners had an engine of their dream. It's called the Ford Flathead V8. In March of 1932, the last year of Prohibition, Ford changed the game when it introduced the Flathead V8 engine with 8 cylinders. It was an immediate favorite of the runners. Now, though, with Prohibition over, the runners had the engine, but liquor was legal. But not everybody wanted to play by the rules. The need for bootleg runners remained because illegal whiskey still needed to be moved for people wanting to avoid regulations and taxes. There was a ready market for fast cars and great drivers. If they had learned to drive fast on curvy mountain roads, that was a bonus. A below-the-radar business boomed, especially in the southeastern United States like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. Some visionaries realized that there were also fast car fans who made up a potential market for legitimate car racing. From that same article, NASCAR Rooted in Prohibition Bootlegging, comes this: the legacy of the Prohibition runner went beyond casual backwoods racing in 1936 when the city of Daytona, Florida, held the first organized stock car race as a promotion. It lost money, but a Prohibition-era mechanic named Bill France, who placed 5th in the race, was determined to find a way to organize stock car racing. France wanted to create a legitimate racing circuit. 10 years later, he organized a meeting in Daytona Beach to discuss the future as he saw it. The National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR, was born. The following year, it ran its first race as a NASCAR race in Daytona. The next year after that, the first NASCAR Strictly Stock, now known as the NASCAR Cup Series, race was run in Charlotte at the Charlotte Fairgrounds Speedway. 30 years later, CBS broadcast a 500-mile NASCAR race live in its entirety for the first time in broadcast history. France's dream had come true. Racing cars was now a recognized sport. Okay, that's NASCAR. But where did the Earnhardts fit in this race car history? Let's go back to the beginning. Let's take a closer look at the patriarch, Ralph Earnhardt. You know, if you look at his life, you realize he was born in the right place, North Carolina, at the right time, stock market crash, with the right skills and the necessary determination that he could make for himself a place in the racing world. With race cars, he was a great mechanic. He was also a great modifier of those race cars, so he could get a little bit more performance out of them by just doing a couple of little tweaks. He also made a place for himself as a very courageous driver. His nickname was Ironheart, and he is the one who is the beginning of the Earnhardt Dynasty. He had a successful racing career in NASCAR's very earliest years. He won his first sportsman title in 1956 after he had won 32 times that year. He died in 1973 when he was just 45 years old. He had a heart condition, but he died while he was working on his race car, so I think probably that would have suited him best. Posthumously, he was inducted into the National Motorsports Press Association Hall of Fame in 1989 and the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1997. During NASCAR's 50th anniversary celebration, Ralph was named one of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers, and his son Dale also received that honor. Ralph's hometown was Kannapolis, North Carolina. It's located a little north and east of Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was a boom town for him. It was a textile mill town, one of several in North Carolina at the time, and it was home to both Ralph and to his future wife, Martha. And it was where his most famous racing son, Dale, grew up. Ralph lived only 45 years, but his influence was carried forward through his son Dale and through his grandson, Dale Jr. Ralph died when Dale was 22. He left his son a little bit of money, a group of old dirt racing cars, and the will to win. Ralph in 1953 had experienced the checkered flag. He had won. And he was a winner as a driver. He was a hard worker. He tried to do everything he could for his family, for Martha. He was a very skilled driver, but I think in more ways his brilliance as a mechanic and a car modifier might have been the key to his success. He recognized that the NASCAR organization, even in its infancy, offered an opportunity for him to combine the mechanic skills with the driving skills. He loved working on his cars. He loved modifying them to get that maximum performance. And pretty soon, he decided he could do that himself. This is a picture of him with one of his dirt track cars. He chose the number 8. That was his lucky number. I like this picture because you notice he doesn't even put Earnhardt on his car. He's just Ralph. And they all knew who Ralph was. Tom Higgins in Angel in Black says this: Ralph was a real quiet fellow. He'd tell you one time how you were supposed to do something, and he wasn't going to tell you a lot after that. He butted heads with his son Dale often because he thought Dale ought to be able to get an instruction one time and just go do it. And Dale didn't always know what he was supposed to do or understand or perhaps listen as carefully as he should. This is Ralph with his prized number 8 Chevy. Again, you see, he's just Ralph. He was a calm man. All the accounts that I could find of him indicated that he was a very pleasant man, but quiet is the word that's used over and over and over again. One of the contemporaries suggested that he used his voice, he talked when he was driving his car on the race car. That number 8 has been associated with the Earnhardt family since Ralph took it to the 1959 and the 1960 NASCAR Limited Sportsman Championships. It's a stylized digit. If you look at it, it's kind of cocked to one side. It's a signature font just for them, and it's one of the most recognizable numbers in car racing. His grandson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., used it from the beginning of his career in the NASCAR Cup Series in 1999 through 2007. This is Ralph in one of his paved surface cars. As I told you earlier in the program, he had the skills to drive on both surfaces, and those were distinctly different skills. He was quite good at it. Paul Moore in Angel in Black says this: I guess at the height of his career, Ralph Earnhardt was one of the toughest people I have ever seen drive a car. I like this particular slide. It's kind of a rare slide because it shows Ralph's car, one of his favorites, but it also shows 3 children in front. And the child that's on the far left, the tall boy, that's Dale Earnhardt. That's Ralph's son. It's rare to find a picture of them both there. I was curious about whether they ever raced together, how that worked. And I found this quote in Angel in Black by Dale Earnhardt, by the son. He raced once against his father, and this is what he said. I did race against my dad, Ralph, at Charlotte in the dirt one time, but I never really did it in a sportsman car like he had. The one thing I probably would have liked to have done that I didn't get to do was to drive for my dad. The year he died, he was talking with Mom about putting me in the car the next year rather than having other people drive for him. I think that would have been a lot of fun. Dale Earnhardt, Ralph's son, second generation, nicknamed the Intimidator. Born in 1951, died in 2001. He moved the Earnhardt legend to the next generation, and he did it well. His nickname was Ironhead. His daddy's was Earnhardt, now he's Ironhead. It's probably a play on his dad's nickname, but it also probably has to do with the fact that sometimes he could be very stubborn and very focused when he was driving his race car. He was known in racing circles as the Intimidator. He had a well-earned reputation for intimidating his competition before races and during races. He would be pushy when he was on the track. And because of that, some of his competitors didn't race as well as perhaps they could have. He made his NASCAR debut in May 1975, and he finished 22nd in the World 600 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. He made 676 NASCAR Cup Series starts, and he won 76 of them, including the 1998 Daytona 500. His victory ranks 7th in NASCAR history. Won a record-tying 7 NASCAR championships. He died after a crash during the final lap of the Daytona 500 on February 18, 2001. While other of the Earnhardt family members had multiple crashes, to date, Dale is the only one who was killed in one. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade. That lack of education haunted him later on when he became more and more famous, as he became more and more successful as a race car driver. The problem was, because of his lack of education, he was very tentative about answering questions posed by sports reporters. And of course, sports reporters were looking for good answers. He was very, very uncomfortable with that. He also was uncomfortable in just about any environment where he was considered to, he had to conduct himself like an educated person or appropriately in public. Sports reporters said that he got better at it the older he got, the more experience he had with it. And sooner or later, toward the end especially, he became very good at communicating. But it took him a while. Earnhardt said this, it's quoted in Angel in Black: "I wanted to race. That's all I ever wanted to do. I didn't care about work or school or anything. All I wanted to do was to work on race cars and then drive race cars." Sounds like his daddy, doesn't he? "It was always my dream, and I was just fortunate enough to be able to live out that dream." He married 3 times. He had 4 children. His first wife was Latane Brown. They married in 1968, and they divorced in 1970. They had 1 child, Carrie. His second wife was Brenda Jackson. He married her in 1972. Their marriage ended in 1979. They had 2 children, Kelly, and a name you'd be familiar with, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Third wife was Teresa Houston, and she survived Dale. They had 1 child, Taylor. All of the children born to Dale Earnhardt had some direct association with NASCAR and racing, except for Taylor. She and her husband work in rodeo, and they own a cattle ranch. But she also is the official spokesperson for the Dale Earnhardt Foundation. It was Dale Jr. who would move the Earnhardt legacy forward from all of Dale Earnhardt's children. When Dale Earnhardt died, and it was a tragic death, he died on the last lap of a major race in a crash. His hometown of Kannapolis stepped up to help fans remember him. Dale Earnhardt Plaza in Kannapolis has its centerpiece, a 9-foot tall bronze statue that depicts Dale as the locals remembered him, wearing Wrangler jeans, boots, and a short-sleeved shirt with a button-down collar. A designated Dale Trail provides tourists with a map that helps them locate 20 sites in and around Kannapolis associated with Dale and his family. In October 1994, Dale Earnhardt became the second driver in series history to win 7 NASCAR Series championships when he won at Rockingham. In May 2010, at the inaugural NASCAR Hall of Fame class, he was inducted in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of 4. And in November 2016, Jimmy Johnson became the 3rd driver to win a 7th NASCAR Premier Series title, joining Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was the second son born to Dale Earnhardt Sr. He won 26 times in the NASCAR Cup Series. He tied for 29th on the all-time victories list, and he won the Daytona 500 in 2004 and again in 2014. He was the 14-time winner of NASCAR's Most Popular Driver Award. He did not intimidate on or off the track the way his dad had. He loved his grandmother Martha, the matriarch, and she adored him. He had the full family support as he began dealing with problems that were occurring after he had wrecks in the race car business. He had severe concussion after effects. At the beginning, they were fairly mild, but as he had more wrecks, he got more serious repercussions. He had the full support of his racing team as he began dealing with this problem as well. He had to put another driver in his car so that the team could continue racing and competing in NASCAR. And he said it was one of the hardest things he ever had to do. In an attempt to get help for the concussions, he became a patient of a Dr. Michael Collins. Collins was a founding member of the University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center's Sports Medicine Concussion Program. Dale Jr. worked closely with Dr. Collins over a 4-year period before he finally decided, Dale Jr., that the risk of additional hits and further damage while racing was simply not worth it. That's when he spent one more year, a final year, preparing everyone, including himself, for his retirement. At one point early on, Collins advised Dale Jr. to skip those 2 races in order to support his healing process. Earnhardt writes about this in Racing to the Finish. Missing those 2 races was just as miserable as I expected it to be. Actually, it was worse. In 1996, when a broken collarbone forced my dad to pull himself out of his car during the Brickyard 400, he later described watching his famous number 8 going around the track with someone else behind the wheel as being like watching your wife going on a date with some other guy. I have to say that Dad's assessment was pretty accurate. The healing regimen that Dr. Collins prescribed for Dale Jr. was exhausting. Dale Jr. admits he was never, an athlete. He said that he lifted weights. The only thing he lifted was a Coca-Cola or a beer. And then he never rode a bike, he just didn't do those things. It was not part of his life. What Collins described or prescribed for Dale was exhausting because Dale was not an athlete, but also because virtually every exercise he gave him, whether it was a full body exercise or just eye exercises, would trigger the concussion symptoms. Dale Jr.'s symptoms including nausea, dizziness, deep fatigue, uncoordinated eye movements, loss of balance, and very high anxiety, especially when he was in a crowd. He described it this way in Racing to the Finish. I rode an exercise bike and did rounds of elliptical machine. I also did what they call dynamic exercise, 30 rounds of deep squats, lunges, and medicine ball rotations, where I would catch a heavy ball, turn to one side or the other, and toss it to a target behind me. I also did functional testing, speed stepping up and down on a 1-step frame, forward, backward, jogging, and a jump, turn, toss move. After every exercise, measurements were taken, looking to see what symptoms, if any, had been triggered and how bad they became. What they found was that with dealing with straight horizontal lines, anything that moved horizontally and kept my eyes focused straight ahead, I was okay. But anything that moved off that line, that went vertical and took my eyes in different directions, that's when my mind struggled to keep up. Finally, in 2017, he retired. The recurring problems from the multiple concussions had just finally become overwhelming. Collins did a great job with him. Collins got him improvement. He got him back to racing, but in those 4 years while he was racing, he had other hits, and so it just created more brain injury. What does Dale Jr. today do? He co-owns Junior Motorsports. He works as an analyst on NBC. He credits 2 women, his wife Amy and his sister Kelly, with helping him get through that 4-year crisis he endured with those multiple concussions. His wife is lovely. There's no question, she was absolutely right there for him. He readily acknowledges that he could never have gotten through those 4 years without her active support. She got up with him daily for the exercises that he had to do in early light. She worked with him with the ball throwing, and she was his target when he tossed it behind. She worked with him in the evening when he had to do exercises at twilight and after dark. She took him to restaurants and other gatherings where there were people to help him learn to control his anxiety, and she never missed a single appointment with him to go see Dr. Collins. Dale writes about it himself this way. Do you want to know who was setting the alarm every morning and dragging my miserable butt out of bed to do my exercises? Amy. You want to know who set up my gym in our garage and then went in there every day putting me through my paces like a personal trainer turned drill sergeant for 2 or 3 hours every day? Amy. It was Amy who recorded video of my exercises in case Mickey, Dr. Collins, or Dr. Petty needed to see them. It was Amy who stood over behind me catching that medicine ball and tossing it back over and over and over again. And Amy drove me everywhere. She would put her shoulder under me when I lost my balance, and she caught me when I fell down. The other woman he credits with helping him through this terrible period is his sister, Kelly. He admits that the Earnhardt businesses, and there are multiple ones, could not have survived without Kelly. She is co-president and co-owner of Junior Motorsports along with Dale. A little trivia, she actually raced stock cars herself in North Carolina when she was young. During the years that Dale was struggling, Kelly kept those businesses going so that he would have the time to concentrate on healing. Now, there's one other thing that Dale had to do, and that was adjust to post-retirement. What could he do with his time? What could he do with his vast racing experience? What could he could do to help his family dynasty continue to grow? That brings me to the third book that I used for my research. He came up with a highly creative way to use his race car experience and to help with his concussion symptom control. He wrote this book, this children's book, Buster's Trip to Victory Lane. Main character, Buster the race car. This book was published in 2022, and it's the first in a series of 3 Buster the Race Car books written by Dale Jr. They're all suitable for ages 4 through 8. The storyline, according to a review of Buster's, the first book, in Amazon, reads this. When Coach Hogg rescues Buster from a failed racing team, Buster has to figure out how to race with new teammates, learn to keep going even after he makes mistakes, and try with all his might to make it to the finish line before all the other cars. But can Buster navigate his anxiety before race day? One of the biggest hurdles that Dale Jr. had to overcome post-concussion was anxiety, and this first children's book deals with Buster the race car, learning to overcome anxiety in the face of a challenge. There were 2 other books, as I said, in the Buster the race car series. First one, actually book number 2, was Buster Gets Back on Track, September 2023. The storyline, Buster is with the Punchy Motorsports team trying to learn some brand new racing moves. Buster struggles during practice and gets angry and leaves the group, and then he encounters military vehicles who can keep their cool under pressure. And then the third book in the series, which came out in October of 2024, Buster and the Christmas Parade. The storyline here, Buster's main rival in racing is Scuff, the race car. Scuff makes mean comments about Buster, so there's no love lost. Then Coach Hogg asks Scuff to join Punchy Motorsports in the Christmas Parade. Buster must find the spirit of Christmas as he rolls along the route with his fierce competitor. Another generation of Earnhardts, stepping up in various ways. Some of them are working in the Earnhardt businesses. Others are actually racing competitively. The patriarch and the matriarch, their great-grandfather Ralph and great-grandmother Martha, would be very proud. The transition from driving on the track to talking about races happening on the track wasn't without some anxiety for Dale Jr. He writes, "I went from thinking, I wonder if I could be a broadcaster. Will anybody give me a chance? Maybe I can get a shot at it," to thinking, man, I want to do this for a long time. His father said this, "The winner ain't the one with the fastest car. It's the one who refuses to lose." The Earnhardt family, all the generations, there are 4 now, have steadfastly refused to quit, no matter what they set their minds to. In Dale Jr.'s case, his health required him to change careers, but he still is applying all of his experience in the racing game. The Earnhardts, an American dynasty indeed.